You're listening to Unlocked, Your Career by Design with Samantha Florence, Fortune 100 executive, billion-dollar business leader, and founder of Powerhouse Code. Here, you'll discover how to build authority, attract opportunities, and lead with authentic presence. If you're ready to claim your spotlight and step into your next level, you're in the right place. Let's unlock your career by design. In today's episode, I'm breaking down why layoffs, demotions, and the AI revolution is actually an opportunity instead of a threat. Recently, I've been having many fantastic, high-performing professionals share their concerns with me about the state of the economy or the state of the world in general. Because when you look at your feed in LinkedIn, on social media, do you also notice that a lot of the news, let's say when it comes to employment and the workforce, is about big corporations laying off their workers, cutting jobs, replacing people with AI? For example, less than 2 weeks ago, Facebook announced that it would reduce its workforce by 10%, around 8,000 people, and replace those people with AI. On the other hand, Nike announced less than 2 weeks ago that it's laying off another 1,800 people of its US-based workforce. And this is after multiple rounds of layoffs. So it seems like every fabulous professional that is high performing and high achieving that I speak to that work at global companies like Salesforce and Booking.com and ING and Bank of America, Ernst & Young, they're all experiencing this constant wave of reorganization after reorganization, restructuring after restructuring. And there's a couple of things that is driving that. Number one is that profit is under pressure. So one of the key things that I always share with the ladies and the high-performing professionals who go to Elevate You Leaders or the partners and executives I advise is that to look at the impact that a company is making. And how do you measure impact? It starts with the P&L. So when profit and margins are under pressure, it will be reflected in a restructure or a reorganization because Wall Street is watching the company. Now, you might be asking, what does that have to do with me? The soonest you learn how organizations and corporations work, the sooner you can benefit from that. I'll come back to this point later. So that was the number one, restructuring reorganizations based on pressure on bottom line, margins and profit. The second trend, I don't want to say trend because trend almost sounds like a good thing, whereas it is not. The second thing that I'm noticing is this fear that AI will replace you or high achieving, high performing, extremely talented professionals. And I do not want to sugarcoat it. AI is causing a revolution and many jobs as we know them today will disappear. The beauty, however, is how do you embrace AI? How do you leverage AI to supercharge your career, to supercharge your growth instead of running away from it or be fearful that it will replace you? Okay. And the third thing is what I already mentioned is the constant wave of layoff after layoff after layoff. So that goes together with a restructuring and reorganization, but a restructure and a reorganization doesn't always have to end in a layoff. It can also end in a demotion. Have you ever experienced, or maybe you know somebody who has experienced a demotion? It is devastating. It does something to your soul, to your sense of worth, that is very hard to crawl back from. I have seen it. I've never experienced it before myself, but I have worked during my days at Nike. I had many colleagues that during a restructure round were demoted. And that's something very hard to recover from. So imagine you have the title, you have the respect, you worked so hard to get to that position, and then you get the call on Zoom or Teams in 15 minutes, your whole world crumbles down and you hear, "We're happy that you will stay with us to be able to offer you a role that stays with us. However, your position has been downgraded or your position ceases to exist. Therefore, we have a different role for you that is, in a different category." And then usually that's met with a mix of emotions. So imagine that you get that news in a 15-minute Teams or Zoom call. And on the one hand, you're happy because you still have a job, you still have a paycheck, you can still pay the bills. On the other hand, you just heard that everything you've worked for has been undone. Last week, I had a conversation with a senior director, or she was a senior director at a global tech platform. And during a restructure, her role ceased to exist and they offered her a director position. Can you imagine what that does if you have the senior director status, the title, the credibility, and also the results to match that title? And then you hear, "Oh, your position is no longer classified in that role, in that category, therefore it ceases to exist." Awful. So, what can you do about that? Well, I don't have to tell you that working hard, focusing on a performance review is not going to get you there. What is extremely, extremely helpful in the state that the workforce and the employment landscape is currently in is to ensure that you continue to move, that you continue to grow and develop yourself in the direction that your company is moving. What do I mean with that? For example, imagine you were the senior director and everything you have been doing was great. So you're focusing on your job, ticking the box on the job description. But all of a sudden, the company, the bottom line is under pressure. What are you talking about, Sam? Why are you talking about the bottom line? I'm just here to manage a team, or I'm just here to do customer success, you might be thinking. However, the decision makers, the leaders who are in the room are looking at, how do we increase our revenue? How do we minimize our expenses so we can optimize and maximize our profit and our margins? Now, that's a completely different language. So while you might be focused on your role, you might be focused on doing your job extremely well, the top 5%, and you might be the go-to person, you might be the backbone of your department. Your leaders, your decision makers are not even, that's a given. That's the basic things, the basis. And so the unlock is, how do you start to communicate, speak, and understand the same language that your leaders use? Imagine it like a Duolingo, let's say. You understand the language of doing your job, doing it very well, and going the extra mile, being the backbone of the department, the go-to person, whereas your leaders are speaking the language of, how do we restructure? How do we minimize expenses? How do we optimize profit and margins? How do we increase bottom line? This is a completely different game, completely different language. So that's number one. The best way how you can prepare yourself for the landscape that we're currently in and be as prepared as possible. So I always say, imagine you being a shock absorber. So when that restructure comes, when the demotion comes, when the layoffs comes, when your role is potentially, not you, your role is potentially replaced by AI, how can you now already start creating a buffer around yourself that serves as a shock absorber? So when that moment comes, it's like, I'm prepared. That you don't crumble, you don't lose your job, you don't get demoted, because what you have been doing, what others are not doing, is preparing yourself. Staying one step ahead, because that's what leaders do. And so I ask you this question that I ask my listeners all the time. Are you an employee or are you a leader? Because there is a huge, Huge difference between the two. As an employee, you're focused on doing the job, ticking every box in the job description, and then blaming external forces for where you are. My manager doesn't see me. There's a hiring freeze. I don't have sponsors, and so forth and so forth. As a leader, you take control of your career. You take ownership of your career. You are the CEO of your career. And so, as a CEO of your career, navigating your career as if it's a corporation, you know that there will be shocks along the way. You know that a next restructuring round is around the corner. You know that your VP that's currently sponsoring you might walk away or be fired. You know that AI is revolutionizing your workplace. So again, what's the choice here? Keep your head down, do the work, and be the best employee, or navigate and take control of your career like the leader that you are. And so coming back to what I shared at the beginning, reorganizations, restructures, demotions, layoffs, AI revolutions, these are opportunities for you to excel. However, the unlock, again, sits in speaking the same language as your leaders do. And that is the biggest opportunity that I see that is missed. Because most people are focused so much on the job and the role instead of putting on their leader hat or crown. Shall we say crown? Because you're all queens here. Putting on your leadership crown and start speaking the language that leaders, decision makers, and CEOs speak. Okay. And then you might ask, okay, so once I start talking strategy, P&L, bottom line, top line, and all the things, then what? Well, then you know how to position yourself, your role, your work for what the company needs. Are you starting to see and are you starting to notice what a big difference it is on how you manage your career and how you take control of your career in situation A, the hardworking, reliable, high-performing employee, versus situation B, when it's about the high impact leader that is actually runs her career like a CEO. Huge difference. A is at the mercy of external factors that she cannot influence, and B is in control and anticipates events and stays one step ahead. And that's how you win the game. And so my question to you is, as you look at your career, and everything that's happening in the world with AI, with layoffs, demotions, restructures, reorganizations, and the list goes on and on and on. Are you preparing yourself in the best way? Are you supercharging your shock absorber? And are you ready to finally take control of your career like a CEO would do? Let me know. You can always DM me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, what stood out for you, and I'll see you in the next episode. You have been listening to Unlocked, Your Career by Design with Samantha Florence. If today's episode sparked something, here's your next step. Follow the show and leave a 5-star review. That's how we reach more ambitious women ready to break barriers. And if you know a colleague or friend who needs this, share it with them, because lifting one woman lifts us all. Until next week, keep owning your spotlights.